The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber opened with a sound like distant thunder. Ambassador Zikthara walked through them, his forearms moving in perfect rhythm as he approached the center of the room. The alien diplomat's blue skin gleamed under the bright lights, and his three eyes focused on the viewing screen that showed a small blue planet floating in the darkness of space. Earth, the third planet from a yellow star in what the galaxy called the Outer Rim, a world that most civilized species had forgotten existed until 6 months ago, when their primitive radio signals had finally been decoded by the Council's listening posts. Zekthara's voice echoed through the chamber as he spoke to the assembled representatives from dozens of worlds. The Devourers have consumed the Kethmer system. They are moving toward the core worlds. Our military forces are falling back on every front. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the room. We need more soldiers, more bodies to throw at the enemy. The chamber erupted in clicks, growls, and strange musical tones as the various species began arguing among themselves. The Krillian representative, a tall creature with silver skin and 6 arms, stood up from his seat. We have already committed our best warriors. My people have lost 3 entire fleets to those metal monsters. The Velthari Empire has given everything, added another voice from across the room. Our homeworld's defense fleet is the last thing standing between us and extinction. Sekthara raised all 4 of his arms for silence, which is why we must look beyond our traditional allies. The humans have been monitored by our scouts for several of their years. They show promise as a warrior species. Their entire history is filled with warfare and conflict. A ripple of laughter passed through the chamber. The Krillian representative's voice dripped with amusement. The humans? Those primitive creatures who still use chemical propulsion to leave their own atmosphere? They fight with metal projectiles and chemical explosives. What could they possibly offer against the Devourers? Numbers, Zekthar replied simply. They have over 7 billion individuals on their world. They breed quickly and seem to have little regard for their own lives. When fighting, perfect cannon fodder. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The assembled diplomats looked at each other, then at the image of Earth on the viewing screen. It was a desperate plan, but these were desperate times. How many do we request? Asked the Velthari representative. 1 legion, Zekthara said. 5,000 soldiers. Enough to make a difference in the coming battles, but not so many that we appear to be completely dependent on primitives. The vote was unanimous. Earth would be contacted and given the honor of joining the Great War against the Devourers. 3 days later, Captain Jake Morrison stood in the Pentagon briefing room, his weathered face showing no emotion as he read the translated message that had arrived through channels he didn't even know existed. The communication had come through their deep space monitoring stations, decoded by the brightest minds in the intelligence community. So let me get this straight, Morrison said, looking up from the tablet in his hands. Aliens are real. They've been watching us for years. There's a galactic war going on, and they want us to send 5,000 soldiers to fight in it. General Patricia Brooks sat at the head of the conference table, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She had been running black operations for the military for 20 years, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. That's the situation. Captain, they seem to think we're some kind of primitive species that breeds quickly and dies easily. Cannon fodder, Morrison said flatly. Exactly. Brooks leaned forward, her eyes sharp with intelligence. They want a legion. 5,000 soldiers. They expect us to send them with basic weapons and hope for the best. Colonel Ryan Davis, head of the Terran Defense Initiative, spoke up from his position near the wall display. They made one mistake in their calculations. General, they assumed we would respond like a primitive species. Brooks smiled, and Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. He had seen that smile before, usually right before someone's day got very bad, very quickly. "Show him," Brooks said. Davis moved to the control panel, and the lights dimmed. The wall display came to life, showing images that made Morrison's eyes widen. Soldiers in black armor that seemed to absorb light. Weapons that hummed with contained energy. Vehicles that moved without visible means of propulsion. For the last 15 years, we've been preparing for the possibility of contact with hostile alien species, Davis explained. Every black-budget project, every classified research program, every piece of technology that officially doesn't exist. We've been getting ready for this day. Morrison stared at the images. "This is all real?" "As real as the chair you're sitting in," Brooks replied. "The aliens want a legion. They're going to get one, but not the kind they're expecting." Dr. Lisa. Adams stepped forward from her position near the back of the room. The scientist was young, maybe 30, with bright green eyes and blonde hair that she kept pulling back nervously. "Captain Morrison, have you ever heard of neural interface technology?" "Science fiction stuff," Morrison replied. "Not anymore." Adams moved to the display controls, and the images changed. Now they showed soldiers moving with impossible precision, their weapons firing with accuracy that seemed to defy physics. Every soldier in the human legion will have their mind directly linked to their combat systems. They'll think, and their equipment will respond. They'll see threats before they become dangerous. They'll coordinate with their team members without speaking a word. Morrison watched the demonstration footage, his military mind automatically analyzing what he was seeing. "How fast are they?" "Fast enough to dodge bullets," Adams replied. "Strong enough to punch through steel. Smart enough to outthink any enemy they encounter." Sergeant Maria Santos stepped forward from her position near the door. She was a compact woman with dark hair and muscles that spoke of years of hard training. "Permission to demonstrate, General?" Brooks nodded. Santos moved to the center of the room, and suddenly her casual military uniform seemed to shift and flow. In seconds, she was wearing black armor that covered her from head to toe. The transformation was silent, smooth, and absolutely terrifying. "The armor is stored in nanoscale until needed," Santos explained, her voice now coming through speakers in the suit. "It can stop anything short of a direct hit from a nuclear weapon. The strength enhancement allows me to lift approximately 10 tons. The speed enhancement means I can run at 60 miles per hour for extended periods." Morrison stood up slowly, his mind racing. "How many soldiers can we equip like this?" 5,000, Davis replied. "Exactly what they asked for." Brooks stood up, her expression serious. "Captain Morrison, I'm offering you command of the Human Legion. You'll be taking 5,000 of Earth's finest soldiers into a war that will determine the fate of the galaxy. But you won't be going as cannon fodder. You'll be going as the most advanced military force the galaxy has ever seen." Morrison looked around the room at the faces staring back at him. Scientists, soldiers, and generals who had spent years preparing for this moment. "What's the catch?" "The catch," Brooks said, "is that once we reveal what humanity is really capable of, the galaxy will never be the same. We'll go from being ignored primitives to being the species that everyone either wants as an ally or fears as an enemy." Morrison thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. "When do we leave?" 2 weeks, Brooks replied. "Think you can get a legion ready in 2 weeks?" Morrison smiled, and for the first time since entering the room, he felt completely confident. "General, give me 5,000 volunteers and 2 weeks, and I'll give you a legion that will make the aliens wish they had never heard of Earth." Meeting ended with handshakes and salutes, but as Morrison walked out of the Pentagon that day, he knew that everything had changed. Humanity was about to introduce itself to the galaxy, and it was going to be a very memorable first impression. The Galactic Council's military staging station floated in the darkness of space like a massive metal city. Admiral Vexhari stood at the observation deck, watching the stars through the thick transparent walls. The Krillian officer had been fighting the Devourers for 3 years now, and the war was not going well. "Another transport arriving, Admiral," reported Lieutenant Kesara from her position at the sensor station. The young officer's 6 arms moved quickly over the controls as she read the incoming data. "It's the human vessel." Vexhari turned toward the sensor display, expecting to see the usual cramped military transport that most primitive species used. Instead, the screen showed something that made him pause. The approaching ship was sleek and dark, with lines that seemed to flow like water rather than the blocky construction he was used to seeing. "That's their transport?" he asked Admiral. "The vessel identifies itself as the Terran Dawn. It's requesting docking permission." Vexhari studied the ship on the screen. It was big, maybe twice the size of a standard transport, but it moved through space with a grace that suggested advanced technology. The hull seemed to bend light around, it making it difficult to focus on. "Grant them docking bay 7, he ordered, "and send a security detail to meet them." "Admiral," Kesara said hesitantly, "the ship's weapon systems are unusual. Our sensors can't get a clear reading on what they're carrying." "Probably primitive kinetic weapons," Vexhari replied. "Nothing we haven't seen before." The Terran. Dawn approached the station with smooth movements that defied physics. Most ships needed constant thrust corrections to dock properly, but this vessel seemed to glide through space as if it were flying through atmosphere. The docking process was completed in half the usual time. Vexhari made his way to docking bay 7, followed by a group of officers from various species. They wanted to see what the humans looked like, these primitive warriors who were supposed to help them fight the Devourers. The airlock opened with a soft hiss, and the first human stepped onto the station. Captain Jake Morrison walked through. The airlock wearing a simple gray uniform that looked almost casual compared to the elaborate military dress of the other species. He was tall for a human, with short brown hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything around him. Behind him came more humans, each wearing the same simple uniform. "Welcome to Staging Station Alpha," Vexhari said, stepping forward. "I am Admiral Vexhari of the Krillian Defense Force." Morrison nodded politely. "Captain Morrison, Terran Defense Initiative. Thank you for the welcome, Admiral." The human's voice was calm and professional, but Vexhari noticed something in his eyes. It was a look he had seen before in the most dangerous warriors he had fought alongside. It was the look of someone who had seen real combat and survived. "We're eager to see your legion, Captain," said Commander Vekmal, a representative from the Velfari Empire. "Our intelligence reports suggested you would be bringing 5,000 soldiers." "That's correct," Morrison replied. "They're coming aboard now." The humans began filing off their ship, and Vexhari watched with growing confusion. These soldiers didn't look like the primitive warriors he had expected. They moved with perfect coordination, their steps in sync without any visible signals between them. Each human carried equipment that looked far more advanced than anything he had seen from other primitive species. Commander Alex Turner stepped up beside Morrison. He was younger than the captain, with blonde hair and blue eyes that seemed to glow with intelligence. "Admiral, we'd like to begin our briefing on enemy positions as soon as possible. My team has been studying the Devourer threat for months." "Studying?" Vexhari asked. "How could you study them? Your species has never encountered the Devourers before." Turner smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "We've been monitoring your communications, Admiral. Every battle report, every tactical analysis, every piece of intelligence you've gathered over the past 3 years. We know more about the Devourers than most of your frontline commanders." The alien officers exchanged glances. The humans had been listening to their communications? How is that possible? "You've been spying." "On us?" Commander Thekmal demanded. "We've been learning from you," Morrison replied calmly. "When someone invites you to a war, it's smart to understand what you're getting into." More humans continued to file off the ship, and Vexhari realized that something was very wrong with his assumptions. These soldiers wore armor that seemed to shift and flow around their bodies. Their weapons hummed with contained energy that made his fur stand on end. Most disturbing of all, they moved with the confidence of veterans, despite their species having never fought in a galactic war. Lieutenant Commander Rachel Stone approached the group of alien officers. She was a compact woman with dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. Her armor was black and seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice carrying through speakers in her helmet, "we appreciate the opportunity to serve alongside your forces. The human Legion is ready for immediate deployment." "Immediate deployment?" Vexhari asked. "Don't you need time to adapt to alien technology? To learn our tactics?" Stone's helmet retracted, revealing a human face that smiled with predatory anticipation. "Admiral, with respect, we've been preparing for this war since before you knew. We existed. We don't need to adapt to your technology. We brought our own." She gestured toward the docking bay, where more humans were unloading equipment that defied easy description. Vehicles that floated above the ground without visible propulsion. Weapons that looked like they belonged in a science fiction movie. Medical equipment that seemed to be operating itself. "What kind of technology level does your species possess?" Commander Thekmal asked, his voice tight with concern. "The kind that wins wars," Morrison replied simply. Dr. Lisa Adams stepped forward. From the group of humans. She was young and looked harmless, but when she spoke, her words carried the weight of absolute certainty. "We've analyzed the Devourer threat from every angle. Their technology is impressive, but it has 17 critical weaknesses. We've developed countermeasures for each one." 17 weaknesses? Vexhari asked. "Our best scientists have been studying the Devourers for years. We've identified maybe 3 potential vulnerabilities. That's because you've been fighting." "A defensive war," Adams replied. "You've been reacting to what they do instead of predicting what they'll do. We've been preparing for an offensive war." The alien officers watched as the humans continued to unload their equipment. Each piece of technology looked more advanced than anything they had seen before. The soldiers moved with mechanical precision, but there was something organic about their coordination that made Vexhari's skin crawl. "How many ships did you bring?" he asked. "1," Morrison replied. "A Terran Dawn carried our entire legion. 1 ship? That's impossible. 5,000 soldiers and all their equipment couldn't fit on a single transport." Turner smiled again. "Admiral, you're thinking like someone who uses primitive technology. Our transport has capabilities you haven't seen before." Sergeant Maria Santos walked past the group, her armor shifting color to match the station's lighting. She was carrying a weapon that seemed to be made of pure energy contained in a metal framework. As she moved, the weapon's display showed tactical information that flowed like water. "Santos," Morrison called, "show our new allies what human engineering looks like." Santos stopped and turned toward the group. Her armor's display systems came to life, showing readouts that made no sense to the alien observers. "This is standard equipment for human Legion personnel," she said. "Neural interface allows direct thought control of all systems. Tactical display provides real-time battlefield analysis. Weapon systems are adaptive and self-improving." "Self-improving?" Vexhari asked. "The weapons learn from each battle." Santos explained. "They get better at killing the enemy every time they're used." The alien officers stood in stunned silence as the implication sank in. They had asked for primitive cannon fodder to throw at the Devourers. Instead, they had received something that might be the most advanced military force in the galaxy. "Captain Morrison," Vexhari said slowly, "exactly what kind of species are humans?" Morrison looked around at the assembled alien officers then. At his own soldiers, who were efficiently setting up their equipment with movements that seemed almost too perfect to be natural. "The kind that survives," he replied, "no matter what the galaxy throws at us." The humans continued their work, and the aliens watched in growing amazement. They had thought they were summoning help for their war. Instead, they had awakened something that might change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The human legion had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same. The warning alarm screamed through the command center of Staging Station Alpha as red lights flashed across every display. Admiral Vexhari rushed to the main tactical screen, his 6 arms moving quickly over the controls as he read the incoming. "Data. Devourer swarm approaching Zarian 7, reported Lieutenant Kesara, her voice tight with fear. "Estimated force size is over 10,000 units. Vexhari felt his blood turn cold. Zarian 7 was a mining colony with over 2 million civilians. The defense force there consisted of maybe 300 soldiers from various species. They wouldn't last an hour against a swarm that size. "Status of our response fleet?" he asked. "Admiral, our nearest ships are 4 hours away." Commander Thekmal reported from his position at the communications station. "By the time we arrive, the colony will be gone." The tactical display showed the horror unfolding at Zarian 7. The Devourers moved like a silver tide across the planet's surface, consuming everything in their path. Buildings, vehicles, people, nothing could stop them. The mechanical creatures converted everything they touched into more of themselves, growing stronger with each passing minute. "The colony defense force is requesting immediate support," Kesara sighed, her voice breaking. "They're being overrun on all fronts." Vexhari stared at the screen, feeling helpless. This was how it always went. The Devourers would appear without warning, consume everything they could reach, and disappear before any meaningful help could arrive. 3 years of this war, and they still couldn't match the enemy's speed. "Admiral," came a calm voice from behind him. Vexhari turned to see Captain Morrison standing in the doorway of the command center. The human officer looked relaxed, as if he were discussing the weather instead of watching the destruction of an entire world. "Captain, this is a restricted area," Vexhari said. "I know," Morrison replied. "I'm requesting permission to deploy." The human legion to Zarian 7. The command center fell silent. Every alien officer turned to stare at the human captain. Commander Thekmal was the first to speak. "Captain, with respect, your soldiers have never faced the Devourers before. This swarm is 10,000 units strong. Even our most experienced forces would be destroyed." Morrison nodded calmly. "How long do we have before the colony is completely overrun?" "Maybe 2 hours," Vexhari replied. "But Captain, you don't understand. The Devourers aren't just soldiers. They're a perfect killing machine. They adapt to any weapon used against them. They learn from every battle. They never stop, never retreat, never show mercy." "Sounds like a challenge," Morrison said, and something in his voice made Vexhari's fur stand on end. "Captain, I cannot allow you to throw away your soldiers' lives on a hopeless mission," Vexhari said firmly. Morrison smiled, and it was the most frightening expression Vexhari had ever seen on a human face. "Admiral, you're not throwing away our lives. You're unleashing us." Before Vexhari could respond, Morrison was speaking into his communication device. "Morrison to all units. We have a target. Zarian 7. Devourer swarm. Estimated 10,000 units. This is what we trained for." The response came back immediately. crackling through the command center speakers. "Copy that, Captain. Human Legion is ready for deployment." Morrison turned back to Vex Hari. "Admiral, I need you to patch us into the colony's communication system. And I need you to start recording. Everything that happens." "Recording? Why?" "Because after today, the galaxy's going to want to know what a human legion looks like in action." Vex Hari stared at the human captain, then slowly nodded. "Patch them through," he ordered. The main screen split to show both the tactical view of Zarian 7 and the human legion preparing for deployment. Vex Hari watched in fascination as the human soldiers moved with mechanical precision toward their transport pods. Each soldier wore the same black armor that seemed to absorb light, and each carried weapons that hummed with contained energy. "Zarian 7 Defense Force, this is Captain Morrison of the Human Legion." Morrison's voice carried across the communication system. "We're coming to assist. Hold your positions." The response came back weak and filled with static. "Human Legion, this is Colonel Vex Thin of the Zarian Defense Force. We're being overrun. The Devourers are everywhere. We can't hold much longer." "Understood, Colonel. Just keep your people alive for 30 more minutes." 30 minutes? Vex Thin's voice cracked. "Captain, there are 10,000 of them. How many soldiers do you have?" 5,000, Morrison replied calmly. "More than enough." The human transport. Pods launched from the Terran dawn like falling stars. Each pod contained a single soldier, but as they descended toward Zarian 7, something strange began to happen. The Devourer's communication signals, which had been a constant buzzing on the tactical displays, suddenly began to fail. "What's happening to their network?" Cassara asked, staring at her instruments. "Specialist Garcia's Cyber Warfare Division is saying hello," Morrison replied. "The Devourers rely on networked communication to coordinate their attacks. We're turning that network against them." On the tactical display, the Devourer swarm began to slow and break apart as their units lost contact with each other. The mechanical creatures that had been moving in perfect coordination suddenly seemed confused and disorganized. "Impossible," Commander Thekmal breathed. "No one has ever successfully hacked Devourer systems. No one has ever tried the right approach," Morrison said. "We spent 2 years studying their communication protocols. We didn't just learn how to hack them. We learned how to make them hack themselves." The first human pod hit the planet's surface in the middle of a Devourer. Assault line. The pod door opened, and Corporal Jennifer Walsh stepped out into the chaos of battle. Her armor's display systems came to life, showing her the location of every enemy unit within a mile radius. The Devourers closest to her pod turned their attention from the fleeing civilians to this new threat. 50 mechanical creatures charged toward her position, their metal claws extended and their red sensors glowing with killing intent. Walsh raised her weapon, and the first Devourer simply stopped existing. The energy beam that emerged from her rifle didn't just destroy the creature, it unmade it at the molecular level. The second Devourer met the same fate, then the third, then the fourth. "How is she moving so fast?" Vex Hari asked, watching the tactical display with growing amazement. "Neural interface technology," Morrison explained. "She's not aiming the weapon. She's thinking at the target, and the weapon is doing the rest." More pods landed across the planet's surface, and each one disgorged a soldier who began carving through the Devourer swarm with impossible efficiency. The aliens watched in stunned silence as their screens showed readings that shouldn't have been possible. Staff, Sergeant Chris Murphy's laughter echoed across the battlefield as he waded through a group of Devourers with weapons that seemed to anticipate his every move. The mechanical creatures tried to adapt to his tactics, but every time they changed their approach, his weapons changed faster. "The Devourers are learning," Commander Thekmal said. They're adapting to human tactics. And the human weapons are learning faster, Morrison replied. Every shot teaches them something new about how to kill devourers more efficiently. Lieutenant Commander Rachel Stone's squad landed near the colony's main population center, where thousands of civilians were trapped in a building surrounded by devourers. The mechanical creatures had been slowly cutting through the building's defenses and would have reached the civilians within minutes. Stone's team moved through the devourer formation like a knife through paper. Their weapons fired in perfect coordination, each shot calculated to maximize damage to the enemy while minimizing risk to the civilians. In less than 5 minutes, over 300 devourers had been reduced to scrap metal. Colony Defense Force, this is Stone. Population. Center is secure. Moving to assist other positions. Stone, this is Colonel Vexton. How is this possible? My best soldiers couldn't handle 50 devourers. You just destroyed 300. Different approach, Colonel. We don't fight the devourers. We delete them. The battle continued for another hour, but the outcome was never in doubt. The human legion moved across Zarian 7 like a force of nature, systematically destroying every devourer they encountered. The mechanical creatures tried every tactic they had learned over 3 years of warfare, but nothing worked against the humans. Final sweep complete, Morrison announced. Zarian 7 is secure. All devourer units have been eliminated. The command center fell silent as the implications sank in. The battle for Zarian 7 should have taken days and resulted in the complete destruction of the colony. Instead, the human legion had ended it in 4 hours with 0 casualties. Captain Vexhari said slowly, "What exactly are humans?" Morrison looked around the command center at the faces staring back at him. Alien officers who had spent years losing battles against an enemy that seemed unstoppable. We're the species that ends wars, Admiral. And this war just got a lot shorter. Admiral Vexhari stared at the tactical display showing Zarian 7, unable to believe what he was seeing. The planet that should have been consumed by the devourers was now completely secure. Green indicators showed human legion forces at every strategic location, while red indicators showing devourer presence had simply vanished. "Run the analysis again," he ordered Lieutenant Cassara. "I've run it 5 times, Admiral," she replied, her voice shaking. "The results are the same. Total devourer casualties, 10,047 units. Human casualties, 0, 0. Commander Thekmal asked from his position at the communication station. "That's impossible. Even our best forces lose. At least 30% when fighting the devourers. Not just 0 casualties," Cassara continued. 0 injuries. According to the medical scanners, every human soldier is in perfect health. Some of them are showing vital signs that suggest they enjoyed the battle. Vexhari turned to look at Captain Morrison, who stood calmly beside the main display as if nothing unusual had happened. "Captain, I need to understand what just occurred down there. Your soldiers didn't just defeat the devourers. They destroyed them with an efficiency that our best military analysts say is mathematically impossible." Morrison nodded. "Would you like a full tactical breakdown, Admiral?" Before Vexhari could answer, the main display changed to show a 3-dimensional map of the battle. Dr. Lisa Adams appeared as a hologram in the center of the command room, her image flickering slightly as she transmitted from Earth. "Good evening, gentlemen," Adams said, her young face serious despite the incredible victory they had just witnessed. "I'm Dr. Adams, head of the Human Legion Technology Development Program. Captain Morrison asked me to explain what you just saw." The holographic display showed the planet Zarian 7, with thousands of red dots representing the devourer swarm. Then blue dots appeared as the human legion deployed, and the red dots began disappearing with frightening speed. "The devourers are indeed a formidable enemy," Adams continued. Their adaptive technology, networked intelligence, and self-replicating capabilities make them nearly perfect killing machines. Nearly perfect? Nearly? Vexhari asked. They have 17 critical weaknesses, Adams replied. We identified them during our 2-year analysis of every piece of intelligence the Galactic Council has gathered. The problem is that most Scifistories try to fight the Devourers using the same approach over and over again. The display changed too. Show typical alien battle tactics. Ships firing energy weapons that the Devourers quickly adapted to resist. Ground forces using predictable formations that the mechanical creatures learned to counter. Defensive positions that the enemy simply overwhelmed through superior numbers. You've been fighting a reactive war, Adams explained. You wait for the Devourers to attack, then respond to what they do. This allows them to learn your tactics and develop countermeasures. Major Kevin Wright materialized as another hologram. Beside Adams, the tactical officer was tall and thin, with sharp eyes that seemed to see everything at once. We took a different approach. Instead of reacting to Devourer tactics, we studied their behavioral patterns and predicted what they would do. The display now showed the Human Legion's battle plan. Each soldier's movement had been calculated to exploit specific weaknesses in Devourer programming. The cyber warfare attack had been timed to disrupt their network at the exact moment when they would be most vulnerable. The Devourers adapt to whatever kills them, Wright continued. So we made sure that our weapons never killed them the same way twice. Each shot used a different energy frequency, a different approach, a different method of destruction. But how is that possible? Commander Thekmal asked. Weapons can't change their fundamental properties during battle. Ours can, Morrison said simply. Show them the rifle demonstration, Adams. The hologram changed to show a human soldier holding what looked like a standard energy rifle. As they watched, the weapon's internal structure shifted and flowed like liquid metal. Energy readings showed the weapon changing its output frequency dozens of times per second. Adaptive weapons technology, Adams explained. Each rifle contains millions of microscopic machines that rebuild the weapon's firing mechanism between shots. The Devourers never faced the same weapon twice. Sergeant First Class Lara Bennett appeared on the communication screen from the surface of Zarian 7. She was standing in what had been the center of the Devourer swarm, her black armor gleaming in the planet's sunlight. Around her, piles of metal debris showed where thousands of enemy units had been destroyed. Admiral Vexhari, Bennett said, her voice carrying clearly through the speakers. I'm transmitting detailed scans of the Devourer remains. You might find them interesting. The tactical display filled with data that made Vexhari's eyes widen. These readings show that the Devourers were trying to adapt to human weapons, but they couldn't complete the process. That's correct, Bennett replied. Our weapons changed faster than their adaptation protocols could handle. It's like trying to hit a target that moves every time you aim at it. But there's something else you should know, Adams said, her expression becoming serious. The Human Legion represents approximately 0.0001% of Earth's total military capability. The command center fell completely silent. Vexhari felt his 6 arms go numb as the implications hit him. What did you say? 5,000 soldiers? Adams repeated. Out of a total military force of approximately 50 million active personnel. And the Human Legion isn't even our most advanced unit. They're what we send when we want to be polite. Morrison stepped forward, his expression calm, but his eyes sharp with intelligence. Admiral, the Galactic Council asked for a legion. Earth sent exactly what was requested, but we could have sent a lot more. How much more? Vexhari asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Enough to end this war in a week, Morrison replied. The Human Legion was designed as a test unit. We wanted to see how galactic warfare compared to what we're used to fighting on Earth. What do you usually fight on Earth? Commander Vekmal asked. Each other, Morrison said simply. Humans have been perfecting the art of warfare for thousands of years. We've fought wars with sticks and stones, wars with chemical explosives, wars with nuclear weapons. We've developed tactics for every environment, every situation, every possible enemy. The display changed again, showing images of human history. Battles fought on land, sea, air, and space. Weapons that ranged from simple clubs to devices that could destroy entire planets. Tactics that had been refined through millennia of constant conflict. The Devourers are dangerous, Adams said, but they're just one type of enemy. Humans have been preparing for every type of enemy. We've been getting ready for this war since before your species developed spaceflight. Bennett's voice came through the speakers again. Admiral, there's something else. We've been monitoring Devourer communication signals across this entire sector. They're calling for reinforcements. How many reinforcements? Vexhari asked. All of them, Bennett replied. Every Devourer unit in known space is moving toward this position. Estimated total force size, 2 million units. The command center erupted in panic. 2 million Devourers was enough to consume entire star systems. It was a force large enough to end the war by destroying every inhabited world in the galaxy. Admiral? Morrison said calmly. I'm requesting permission to contact Earth. I think we're going to need a bigger legion. Vexhari stared at the human captain, then at the tactical display showing the approaching Devourer fleet. Captain, 2 million units. Even with your advanced technology, 5,000 soldiers can't handle that many enemies. Morrison smiled. And for the first time since meeting him, Vexhari realized that the expression wasn't threatening. It was genuinely amused. Admiral, Morrison said, you're still thinking like someone who doesn't understand what humans are capable of. 2 million Devourers isn't a threat. It's a target-rich environment. He turned toward the communication station. Morrison to Earth Command. We need to escalate our response. The enemy is concentrating their forces. The response came back immediately. Copy that, Captain. How many additional legions do you require? Morrison looked around the command center at the alien faces staring back at him. Better make it 10 legions. We want to make sure we don't run out of targets. 10 legions confirmed. Deployment begins in 6 hours. Morrison turned back to Admiral Vexhari. Admiral, the war you've been fighting for 3 years is about to end. I suggest you prepare your people for what comes after. As the communication ended, Vexhari realized that everything had changed. The galaxy's greatest threat was about to become humanity's greatest opportunity to show what they were truly capable of. 3 months had passed since the Battle of Zirion 7, and the galaxy was a very different place. Admiral Vexhari stood in the same observation deck where he had first watched the Terran dawn arrive. But now he was looking at something that would have been impossible to imagine just a few months ago. The Devourer threat was gone. Not defeated, not driven back, but completely eliminated from known space. The 2 million units that had been moving toward Zirion 7 had lasted exactly 18 hours against the 50,000 soldiers of the expanded human legion. The mechanical creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for years had been systematically hunted down and destroyed. Admiral, Lieutenant Kessara called from her station. The Galactic Council is ready for your report. Vexhari nodded and made his way to the communication chamber. The main screen showed representatives from dozens of species, all gathered in the Great Assembly Hall on the Council homeworld. Their faces showed a mixture of relief, gratitude, and something that looked very much like fear. Ambassador Zekthara spoke first, his 4 arms moving nervously as he addressed the assembled representatives. Admiral Vexhari, please give us Your final report on the Devourer situation. The threat has been completely eliminated, Vexhari reported. Human forces have confirmed the destruction of all Devourer units in this galaxy. There are no remaining enemy strongholds, no hidden fleets, no backup systems. The war is over. A murmur ran through the council chamber. Even though they had been receiving reports for weeks, the reality was still difficult to accept. A threat that had seemed unstoppable had been ended in less than 3 months by a species they had considered primitive. What are human casualties? Asked the Krillian representative. 0 deaths, 43 minor injuries, mostly from accidents during equipment maintenance, Vexhari replied. The humans lost more personnel to training exercises than to actual combat. The silence that followed was broken by Commander Thekmal's voice. Admiral, please explain to the Council what we observed during the final battle. Vexhari activated the tactical display, showing the last known position of the Devourer fleet. 2 million mechanical creatures had been spread across 17 star systems, preparing for what they believed would be their final victory over organic life. The human legion deployed what they called a standard response force, Vexhari began. 50,000 soldiers, supported by their technology. The engagement lasted 18 hours from first contact to complete elimination of enemy forces. 18 hours, Zekthara repeated slowly, to destroy 2 million Devourers. The humans didn't just fight the Devourers, Vexhari continued. They anticipated every move the enemy would make. When the Devourers tried to adapt, the human weapons adapted faster. When the mechanical creatures attempted to retreat and regroup, human forces were already waiting for them. The display showed the final moments of the war. Devourer units scattered across multiple systems, trying desperately to escape, only to find human soldiers appearing wherever they went. The enemy that had once seemed unstoppable was reduced to fleeing in terror from creatures they couldn't understand or defeat. But the most significant discovery, Vexhari said, was what we learned about human military doctrine. They call it overwhelming technological superiority combined with adaptive tactics. They don't just win battles. They end wars. Captain Morrison appeared on the communication screen, speaking from the bridge of the Terran Dawn. His calm expression had become familiar to the Council over the past months, but it still made many of the alien representatives uncomfortable. Council members, Morrison said, Earth thanks you for the opportunity to serve alongside your forces. The Human Legion has completed its mission and is ready to return home. Zekthara leaned forward in his seat. Captain Morrison, before you leave, the Council has a formal request. We're listening, Morrison replied. The Galactic Council formally invites Earth to join as a full member, with all the rights and privileges that membership provides. We also request that humanity consider sharing your technology and military knowledge with other member species. Morrison was quiet for a moment, and Vexhari could see him thinking carefully about his response. Ambassador, that's a generous offer. Earth will need time to consider the implications of full galactic membership. Implications? Asked the Velthari representative. Joining the galactic community means accepting responsibility for galactic security, Morrison explained. Once Earth becomes a full member, any threat to the galaxy becomes our problem to solve. That's a significant commitment. Dr. Adams appeared as a hologram beside Morrison, her young face serious as she addressed the Council. Gentlemen, there's something you should understand about human technology. What you've seen so far represents our military capabilities. But we've also developed other technologies that might interest the galactic community. The display changed to show a small device floating in space. It looked harmless, no bigger than a shuttlecraft, but the energy readings it was producing made several council members gasp. This is a defensive probe, Adams explained. It can generate a shield strong, enough to protect an entire star system from any known weapon. Earth currently has 50,000 of these devices in production. 50,000? Zekthara asked weakly. We believe in being prepared, Adams replied. We've also developed faster-than-light communication systems, medical technology that can extend lifespans by several hundred years, and energy sources that could power entire civilizations for millennia. Morrison stepped forward again. The technology exists, but sharing it requires trust. Trust that takes time to build. What would Earth require to build that trust? Asked the Krillian representative. Time, Morrison said simply. Time to observe how the galactic community handles peace. The Devourer War is over, but that doesn't mean there won't be other conflicts. We need to see how your species interact when they're not united against a common enemy. Admiral Vexhari watched the exchange. With growing understanding, the humans weren't just offering military assistance. They were positioning themselves as the galaxy's new guardians, but they wanted to do it carefully. Captain, Vexhari said, what happens now? Do humans simply return to Earth and wait? Morrison smiled, and this time the expression was genuinely warm. Admiral, Earth doesn't wait. We prepare. We'll be watching, learning, getting ready for whatever comes next. And if another threat appears, Zekthara asked, then you'll discover that the Human Legion was just our way of saying hello. Morrison replied, Earth has capabilities you haven't seen yet. Technologies we haven't shared. Strategies we haven't used. Dr. Adams nodded. The galaxy is entering a new era of peace and prosperity. Earth intends to make sure it stays that way. The communication ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. The representatives looked at each other, finally beginning to understand what they had awakened. When they contacted the small blue world at the edge of the galaxy. Ambassador Zekthara was the first to speak. We asked for a legion of primitive soldiers to serve as cannon fodder in our war. Instead, the Krillian representative continued, we received the most advanced military force in galactic history. And now they're offering to share technology that could transform our entire civilization, added the Velthari representative. Zekthara looked around the chamber at the faces of his fellow council members. Gentlemen, I believe we have encountered the galaxy's new dominant species. The question is, what do we do about it? We accept their offer, the Krillian representative said firmly. We build the trust they require, and we pray that they continue to see us as allies rather than threats. The vote was unanimous. The galaxy would move forward into a new age, guided by the quiet confidence of a species that had turned warfare into an art form, and then chosen to use that art to protect rather than conquer. On Earth, Captain Morrison stood in the same Pentagon briefing room where this had all begun. General Brooks sat at the head of the table, reading reports from across the galaxy. So, Brooks said, how do you think it went? Morrison smiled. I think the galaxy is about to become a much more interesting place, General. Outside the Pentagon, the rest of humanity went about their daily lives, unaware that they had just become the galaxy's unofficial protectors. But in classified facilities around the world, scientists and soldiers continued their work, preparing for challenges that hadn't been imagined yet. The Human Legion had introduced Earth to the galaxy. Now it was time to see what humanity would do with that introduction.